Okay, this video is kind of spontaneous, and the real reason behind it is I've been getting asked a lot of questions around landing a job in tech or your career in tech, navigating it, and I'm seeing you make a lot of the mistakes that I've made. And it brought up the question, Tiff, why not share some of the biggest mistakes I've made in my tech career thus far, some of the biggest failures, including some really embarrassing moments that I've had to face, so hopefully you don't have to. And that's what we're gonna do today. Also, do you like my new setup? If you haven't seen that video, I'll link it down below where I go through my desk setup, my office setup. I'm really excited about it. Anyways, let's jump into it. As I mentioned, I've seen a lot of comments recently around careers and navigating your first job or second job, or even maybe you're further along in your career and you're like, I just made this massive mistake. Why didn't someone warn me about this? So I wanted to really candidly share with you some of the biggest mistakes I've made in my tech career. And when I say candidly, I mean candid. I'm just gonna be very honest with you with some of the mistakes that I made along the way. The first one being networking. And I shared this one actually in a short form video recently. And I really wanna hone in on it as the first topic in this video because honestly, the majority of us watching this really hate networking. And if you're one of those anomalies that enjoy networking, leave down below because I wanna know who you are and why do you enjoy networking? Actually, I don't mind it, but when I first started out in my career, networking was such a painful thing to do. And it was because I was so nervous, are people going to like me for who I am? Are they going to ask me something that I'm stumped on? You know, I'm supposed to be this technical person. What if they ask me a question I don't have the answer? Am I going to look dumb? All these thoughts kept on coming in my head and really affecting my ability to put myself out there to network. And it also brings up the question, well, where to network? There are so many places out there. Do I have to go to in person? Do I do online? Are people burned out from going online to network? Where do I start? This isn't a question that's just occurred now. It is something that I think has been asked throughout time in many different forms. So I'm gonna share with you some tips that really help me with networking. First being, recognize what kind of person you are. And what I mean by that is how you communicate best. For me, when I get in very large settings, especially around people that I'm not as familiar with, I get really nervous. My face gets a little bit red or a lot red, and I stumble on my words. I feel myself get more nervous, and then in turn I get more nervous. And I recognized early on that I don't do well in big crowds. Now, this is something that throughout the years with practice, I am now much better at, but initially when I was first starting to push myself to network, it was a big struggle for me. And how I overcame that was recognizing, okay, there's other people like me. I'm not alone. I'm not the only one who feels this way. So why not try and network and meet people in a way that I feel comfortable with, which for me is one-on-ones, which is coffee meetups or coffee dates, whatever you want to call it. And so that's what I started to do. I remember the first person I networked with was a cybersecurity engineer actually at Shopify here in Toronto at the time. And I didn't know her at all, but I reached out to her. I actually reached out to her via social media, which I don't advise you to do. I would do LinkedIn instead of social media, but she was very active on social media and I just said, hey, you know, I'm going to a boot camp that's located right next to Shopify. I have a few questions for you about how you got to become a software or a cybersecurity engineer, what your role entails. Could I take you out for coffee at a time that's convenient for you? As simple as that. Really honing in on your eagerness to learn, that you want to connect, finding a time and place that's convenient for them. If you're doing this virtually, then just a day and time that's convenient for them. Doing all that heavy lifting, you could say, so that they just have to show up essentially, and you carry the conversation or have the questions prepared. And I think that's one of the biggest things I really wanted to hone in on is for networking, find what style works best for you. Whether it be you thrive in large settings because maybe it's not so personable and so one-on-one, or maybe you're like me and you like that one-on-one and kind of more intimate settings. Now, actually, I'm gonna move on from this topic of networking because there's a lot more mistakes we need to cover. But if you're interested in networking and want more advice and insight on that, and maybe you think I should make a separate full video for that, leave down in the comments. Another thing I did, a huge, probably the biggest mistake that I made when I first started job hunting, and it really applies though to regardless of where you're at in your career, is I settled. The first job I ever took, let's get personal here. I never fully shared this story, I don't think. The first job I ever took, I was so excited to have a job, I settled. I settled on salary, I settled on position, on title, on everything. Now, I'm very grateful for that job. It brought me a ton of opportunity and I had a really great time there. But looking back, I definitely can see that I settled because I was so anxious and just wanted a job that the first thing that came my way, I accepted. And looking back, that's a huge mistake because before you even start job hunting, especially when you are looking for one of your first jobs, it's easy to feel like I just want a job, especially if something hasn't come around for a few weeks or a month. And you just are so grateful that you end up taking it. This doesn't have to be a mistake. You can look at it from many different angles. But now looking back, I was extremely underpaid. Okay, I'm gonna be really candid here. I was paid when I first started my first job, right out of university, went to a coding bootcamp. I think I was paid $40,000 Canadian, which would be like 30,000 US. So I was underpaid. If you look at numbers where you should be paid when you join a company, when you start out. But I was so excited again that I just took the job. The biggest mistake with this though, isn't even about take money out of the equation, take title out of the equation. It's that if you are going to end up settling at any point in your career, you're going to start resenting where you work. You're going to realize, hey, I'm really underpaid, I deserve more. Or why is this person making so much more than me and this person doing so much more than me? And in turn, you're going to want to leave that company sooner than expected because you're unhappy. And that's a huge mistake because you want to be able to grow and nurture your relationship with that company, build experience there before moving on to the next. Now, in my case, I stuck it out, but I gotta be honest, as much as I enjoyed the work, enjoyed the team and all of that, the back of my head, it was always, how I made a mistake, how I shouldn't have settled, and definitely would never do that again. And another mistake that I made when I was first starting out, and I sometimes catch myself still doing, which is not good, is pretending that I know more than I do. Now, this doesn't come up in interviews because it's very clear, I think, during interviews as to your knowledge. And I'm not talking about that. What I'm talking about is when you are talking to people or, having different conversations with people, pretending you know sometimes everything they're talking about when maybe you don't. Because the reality is that is okay. And you actually sound more intelligent asking questions about what they are speaking about than trying to pretend you know everything. Just because you don't know something that they are specifically talking about doesn't mean you are dumb, doesn't mean you are not as smart as them. It means you're not as versed in that subject as they are. That's all it means. And by asking questions and getting curious, it means that you want to learn, you want to hear more about what they're talking about. And I think we often do this, or I often did this, especially early on in my career, because I was scared that people would think, oh, she's not that technical, oh, she's not that smart, she doesn't deserve to be here. So in turn, I would just nod my head, agree, and then spend more time than I probably should trying to look up what they were talking about or making mistakes along the way that didn't need to be made because of that. And I think that's one of the biggest things that I hope you can get comfortable with is asking questions, being honest and upfront with your knowledge in a specific subject when they come up throughout conversations. And that's something that it takes practice to do, especially asking questions and being vulnerable like that, because it puts you in a position where you're saying, hey, I don't know a ton about this subject, but you're also being put in a position where you're showing you want to learn, and try and look at it from that perspective. Otherwise, it can be a little bit overwhelming. Saying I don't know and following up with a very specific question or curious prompt, there's nothing wrong with that. It's actually a positive thing. And if anyone ever tries to make you feel silly for asking a question, any question, it's definitely a huge red flag. You don't ever want to be around people who make learning or trying to solve different things not enjoyable or feel like you're being pushed down, and that's really important as well. Those are my three main areas that I want you to always keep in mind when you are looking for a new job or growing in your career. Networking more, I know it's painful at times, but it's so important, especially as more competition continues to come. Not settling, not being afraid of saying no, or this is not what I had in mind. Knowing if it's ego or if you are settling. That's an important line to understand as well, but not settling, especially when it comes to your career. And the last one being open about your knowledge when you are having these conversations. And as I mentioned, these typically aren't in interviews. You can't really fake those interviews, but when you are landing the job and growing your skills, being open to not knowing everything, but rather looking at it as a standpoint of you are a curious person forever learning, and through that you are going to excel so much more. All right, I am so curious to hear, where are you at in your career? Are you starting out? Are you further along? Are you job hunting? If you're job hunting, leave down below. Maybe someone will read it who is hiring at the moment. If you have any questions, leave them down below. As always, I answer every single one of your questions. Hit that subscribe button, and I will see you all soon. Thanks, everyone.